Morning. It's good to see y'all. It's that last song is like, Lord, here's my heart. Speak your truth. Well, I know that that's my heart today, and I pray that it's all of yours as well. Last time that I was with you was a number of months back. It was a Wednesday night, and kind of the theme that I had was being a disciple, making disciples, and building the church. Kind of an umbrella, kind of a topic, and then I talked about obedience-oriented discipleship. Well, today I want to kind of have us kind of encounter kind of another thing that would fall underneath that broad spectrum. But I want to start with a story that kind of sets the stage. For those of you that know, some may not, my wife and kids and I spent 17 years in China bringing the gospel to people that really do not have an opportunity to hear. We came back about a year and a half ago. Kids are getting the age, getting ready for college, needing to kind of learn to do life in the U.S. and stuff, and so we're here. But this guy on the picture here is a guy named Wang Kai. And so when we showed up in China, like our heart and the reason that we're there is to bring the good news to unreached, but yet we didn't know anybody. So how does that happen? So my wife and another American lady were out kind of running errands and doing things, and our posture of kind of heart and prayer is always, Lord, connect us. You have to bring the people that you're working with and you're drawing and you're active in their lives, or at least to some degree that they're receptive. And so this guy walks up to him and said, especially looking at our American friends, said, can you teach me English? I really want to learn English. Can you help me? And so generally our ministry approach is we kind of connect guys and girls. And so they say, well, let's see what we can do. So I got connected with Wang Kai, and another American guy friend got connected with Wang Kai for the open door of helping him with his English. But our heart is through the friendship to share the good news. So we didn't take too long before we found out that he had an insatiable appetite for English, but not very receptive to the gospel, not really a hunger there. Fast forward to just a year later, though, and he's sitting on our living room floor around a coffee table with a few others that are gathered for a Bible study, and he says, I want to give my heart to Jesus. I want to be a follower of him. Since then, he was baptized. His sisters come to know the Lord. His mother's come to know the Lord. He's part of house church leadership in China that is invading, influencing the city and beyonds. And it all comes because of a practical open door, life connection. We opened up our lives, we opened up our homes, and through that, we see everything that's happened afterwards. I want to talk with you today about biblical hospitality, because that's what was happening there. With my wife and I being missionaries, we left in 2000 to go overseas, and so you know that you kind of travel around and kind of share, kind of God's heart and such in the midst of that. And so it's always our desire, whether then and each time we come back, is to connect with people as we travel, and we have to be away from home, and hopefully to stay with people to connect. But more times than not, we find that we're put up in a hotel rather than have an open door and a spare bedroom. And so just observation seems like over time, it's like that one of the dynamics that's happening in American culture is that we're losing the skill of hospitality. We're losing the skill of inviting people into our lives and into our homes. And so that is a very, very critical ministry skill that the Lord wants to use and restore where it's been lost for the sake of his kingdom. And so I want to just look at 3 scriptures initially to give us an overview, and then we're going to look at a story and dig deeper so that we see an example of actually what that looks like. There's 3 passages. First one here, all of them will have a bit of kind of commands and warnings. You could say kind of nudgings in the direction we should go, and kind of concerns or things to watch out for, however you want to kind of say that. But here you see in Romans chapter 12, Paul's writing to the Romans church, and he says, share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. But if you look underneath the surface here, that if you're going to share with God's people that are in need, you got to be close enough in proximity to actually know the need. If you're distant, you don't know that it's there. And so there's relationship that's happening there. And it also comes with an open hand to share, to meet a need. And where he's talking about practice hospitality, it's a discipline. You know, people go and they play ball and they go to practice, right? It's a discipline, it's a time, it's a choice. It doesn't happen accidentally. It's an intentional thing. And so Paul's trying to encourage the Roman church that be intentional with your hospitality rather than haphazard. 1 Peter 4:9, it says, offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. So we see share with God's people. Here's offer to one another, kind of maybe a bit more broader scale, but to offer, open hand, palm up, you're extending and you're the initiator. Offer hospitality, and to do so without grumbling. I mean, it's like how easy it is for all of our lives. I'm no different. That we grumble and murmur, right? Inconvenience, things that come into our lives that we don't like. And he's just given us a notice ahead of time. It says, careful, don't grumble. And sometimes it's just hospitality's messy. You know, Wendy and I, we had 24 people in our house just Friday night, 15 students from 8 different countries and all over the world, and volunteers and things, and we were up doing dishes at midnight and getting to bed at 1. And I mean, there's a possibility of doing dishes at midnight. You could grumble, right? But it's a privilege to connect with people and serve them. And I find, at least for me, that one of the helpful things to keep from grumbling is to realize, you know what, it's not about me. It's about God's heart to people. Hebrews 13:2. Paul will probably get to this passage in a few weeks as he goes through Hebrews, but here it says, do not forget to entertain strangers, for by doing so, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. And so when we see this with strangers, and we think, well, that's the guy that's down the street that bought the house that we haven't had time to go down and, kind of greet or meet and, maybe give some cookies, welcome to the neighborhood or whatever, or it's a new guy in the office or what. It's not talking about that, though that is certainly something that we need to keep in mind. What's behind this word is actually talking about foreigners, sojourners, aliens. Those are the strangers. It's the ones that's like outside of kind of our normal circle of life and influence a lot of times. And so God's concerned not just for God's people, not just for one another, but for the aliens, the sojourners, the foreigners that kind of come into our lives or into our sphere. And so with that said, I want to look at a story that says, okay, so we understand Wang Kai's life was changed because we invite him into our lives and spend time with him, and his life's been transformed and is multiplying out. Here we have kind of some nudgings in the right direction of what we ought to be concerned with, and we ought to do hospitality and some things to watch out for, but what's that look like? How do I do that? Maybe we're willing, but maybe don't have the know-how. I want to look at a passage from 2 Kings 4 with Elisha connects with a Shunammite. And we'll just read the story and then we'll go back through it. One day Elisha went to Shunem, and a well-to-do woman was there who urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. And she said to her husband, I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put in it a bed and a table, a chair and a lamp for him. Then he can stay there whenever he comes to us. One day when Elisha came, he went up to his room and laid down there. And he said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite. So he called her, and she stood before him. Elisha said to him, tell her, you've gone to all this trouble for us, so what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? And she replied, I have a home among my own people. So obviously at this point she left. So what can be done for her? Elisha asked. And Gehazi said, well, she has no son, and her husband's old. Then Elisha said, call her. So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. About this time next year, Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. No, my lord, she objected. Don't mislead your servant, O man of God, thinking that it's like this is just too good to be true. But the woman became pregnant, and the next year, about the same time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. So here we've got a story of hospitality. I want to break it down into kind of simple to follow principles that I believe that the Lord will bring to where we can apply these to our own lives to help us to see hospitality restored or to further what we may be doing already. So the first takeaway would be she recognized the opportunity to be hospitable. Verse 8 says, one day Elisha went to Shunem. Now, we don't necessarily know how many times that he's been there before, maybe a lot, maybe it's the first time, we don't know. But he came to her hometown, and their paths crossed, and she recognized an opportunity. It wasn't an accidental meeting. I have to think of like how many opportunities exist for us in our own sphere that we're not even, in a sense, kind of going out of the way, that come into our lives and then kind of pass on, or perhaps they're there every day and we don't recognize it. Because the language here seems to indicate one day, different than other days, one day. And it starts the whole process of the connection with Elijah and all that comes out of that. Another takeaway would be that she was enthusiastic in her hospitality. It says that she urged him to stay for a meal. You know, sometimes that we can, or what, things out of obligation. We do it because we know that we're supposed to. You know, it's kind of driven by that, you know, embarrassed, you know, if we don't do it, or we're going to answer to somebody if we don't, do this thing or check the box on the to-do list or what. But she did it out of her heart. She urged him. She had a desire to see it happen. It wasn't a have to. It was a want to. And so if she had to urge him, you think about it, you generally don't have to urge people if she extends and say, hey, come to my house for a meal. I said, yeah, what time? Urging only comes where there's kind of like a lack of acceptance, at least initially. So that must have been kind of Elisha's initial take on it. So she had to continue with her invitation, at least some number of times. It's not uncommon in kind of biblical culture and Eastern culture that a lack of acceptance isn't necessarily the meaning of that I don't want to. It's very polite kind of posture of saying that, to give you an impression that you should have done this a long time ago and I've just been eagerly waiting for you to ask. No, they're polite. It's a social dynamic that's happening. And so he says no, but then we see this with Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. He's like talking with her, disciples are gone. She eventually goes back into town, and then she says this, or this is the dynamic happening. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. And so when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them. And he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. Why would you have to urge Jesus? You see it again. After the resurrection, 2 disciples walking down the road. He's going somewhere, and it seems as though his path merges with theirs. They're walking now 3 together. And it says, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it's nearly evening. The day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. You find it interesting that even Jesus, in a sense, seems to initially have kind of a reluctance to kind of accept an invitation. It's not his disinterest. It's actually that he's trying, I believe, to draw out whether this invitation is genuine or whether it's a facade and it's just a polite gesture. I was talking with a friend of ours here recently, and that she was talking about, she's a teacher for decades, and that every year on cycle, school year's out, students are gone, teachers kind of pick up their stuff, clean out their desks for the summertime, they're headed out the door, and she says year on end, teachers head out the door and they greet one another, hey, let's get together for a barbecue or get together this summer. And she said, it's never one time happened. See, we have this dynamic in our culture as well. That's just a politeness, right? We don't really mean let's get together, but it's better than see ya. It's a politeness. Well, we see that dynamic happen here, and it's very common in different settings. A certain level, like in our society as America, especially in Eastern cultures, it's even a deeper level where you really have to urge. They're trying to see, is your offer genuine or is it just politeness? We see it with Jesus, we see it with Elisha and the Shunammite. Do we have the Shunammite's heart to where our offer is genuine? We really want to connect with whoever it is that we're making an offer to. We have to work through that so that they know. Another takeaway was that she was consistent in her hospitality. Verse 8 says, so whenever he came by. In verse 10 it says, whenever he comes to us. She had an open door policy. It wasn't just at her convenience. So when he comes by, she doesn't exactly know. He's from out of town, but he comes there and, he's a prophet, so maybe he's preaching or teaching or whatever, or connect. We don't know. But that's his schedule. But whenever he comes by, the door's open. In the U.S., kind of culture is that we're very regimented in schedule. I mean, we've got every hour accounted for on our schedule. We've got our planner. We've got our, whatever in our phone and such like that. And we see these surprise things a lot of times as being an inconvenience. It's actually a temptation, something that we're going to grumble about, But we really need to have a God lens on our eyes to see it as an opportunity. And we need to move out of kind of culturally driven lifestyle dynamics to a kingdom culture to where God wants to connect us with people for his sake and for the benefit of those that are receiving hospitality, you see. That's her posture, that whenever he came, that the door was open. She made a plan to practice hospitality. Verse 10 says, let's make. This doesn't happen by accident. She's thinking, she's observing everything that's happened so far. I've had meals and he's been there, and she said, there's something happening here consistent enough that I need to kind of have a plan. Kind of read this, that I kind of jokingly think that this is a challenge, for us to do this with kind of planning to go out of our way in kind of a longer term to make permanent space. For me, it's a challenge. I didn't grow up kind of having family dynamics. Our hospitality that we do isn't natural for me. I don't have anything on you. I come from a broken family. I don't know that we ever had people in our house. But I'm originally from Kendallville, graduated from school there. 4 years later, I moved down to Florida, became a Christian a year after being down there. And I had two roommates in a three-bedroom house and two guys, Dean and Fred. And then what I began seeing happen was they had this gig going on. There was Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, they had tacos, and they would invite people kind of from church or through their life or whatever over to the house. Soft tacos, ground beef, diced tomatoes and onions and green peppers, whatever. Simple spread, something that two single bachelors can do, right? It's not real complicated. And so they would do this every single night. And that was the first time that I ever really saw, now I understand what was going on, biblical hospitality. Opening up their lives and opening up their homes to be able to connect with people. After a long period of time, this became so kind of pervasive. As I interacted with people that had been invited, they said, there's just a dynamic going on there that people that haven't been invited yet say, like, why haven't I been invited? You know, the ones that have are in, and the ones that haven't yet are kind of, they're, you know, out but not in yet and things. Do we have a plan to make our lives open doors? Do we have a plan to connect with folks and to move outside of kind of our own inconvenience? Okay. Taco Tuesday, it might be something else, but that was my first experience with that. We also see that she was generous in her hospitality. Let's make a small room on the roof and put in it a bed and a table, a chair and a lamp for him. So here's probably the part, at least one part, that would be a temptation to grumble, right? You can just hear it. You know, the Shunammite woman or the lady in the house says, honey, I got a job for you. I got a plan, and I'm going to invite this guy over here, and I want to build this room on a roof and all these things. It's like, I got the plan, and you got the duty. You know, we look at it as guys, it's just like another to-do list that your wife makes for you, But we need to see that this is a privilege and not an inconvenience. It's generosity, that none of this comes off without a commitment of time, without a commitment of some element of money and finances. We've had the privilege of having some Saudi Arabians in our house over the last while that we are connecting with and learning a little bit about their culture. It's 140 degrees in the deserts in Saudi Arabia. There's not a whole lot that happens, in the middle of the day. What she's doing here is she's picked the comfy place, and she's gone out of her way to make a place that's suitable for him, because up on the roof is where the breeze comes through. It's less hot in the middle of the day. And so she's thought through this. What can I do to serve whoever's going to be my guest in a way? And I'm willing to kind of put myself out of time and resources to get it done. What do we have that we can use to bless others? A lot of times that we tend to have, I think, kind of our entertainment and kind of technology and stuff, a lot of times is a hindrance. I don't know if we catch it or not, but a hindrance sometimes to hospitality and certain things happening in our lives rather than a help. I mean, we've got, the Food Network, we've got HGTV, kind of TV and all this, and we see these things, and it's cool, It's cool to see what can be done, but I think sometimes underneath the surface that we think, man, I got to have a 5-star menu. I got to have an HGTV kind of, giveaway or whatever house in order to open up my door. Otherwise, the people are just going to whatever. And to me, that's just a lie from our culture. The subtleties that the enemy that doesn't want ministry to happen, doesn't want life connections to happen, that uses those things that can be really cool, but they can be a hindrance to ministry. I just want to share, this is a Miao village in southwest China, and we're on a trip during the time that we live there. The Miao people are an ethnic group in China that speak a different language, have a different culture. They're not what you would think of kind of typical Chinese. And so we're on a trip with a friend of ours, Xiaolong, to go visit his mother in a village like this. And so this is a long way from where we live. We're in a van, and it's pouring rain, and it's cold as get out. You breathe, and you see your breath, and it's damp, and it sinks through your bones no matter how many layers that you have on. And we're going there to spend the day and overnight and just hang out and such. And so we arrive there, and so she greets us warmly, and then she goes and she kills one of the 2 chickens that she owns to provide for us a meal. And so then we kind of start to hunker down for the night and things and find a place to sleep. And I mean, it's probably 35 outside with pouring rain. I mean, we're driving up through the mountains and things, and the van's going like this all the way up, and it's just, you're soaked and things. You take your muddy boots off at the end of the bed and crawl underneath. You don't get rid of anything. It's just, there's no heat, there's no nothing. The wind's blowing through the house. I mean, that's kind of the setting. It's just cold as all get out. And so she's got 5 chicks, like the little chicks you go out to Farmer's Supply or Rural King or whatever it is, and they kind of give away. She got 7 of these things that she's growing to replace probably the one that she fixes for a meal. And she can only find 5. So these are precious. And so she's run around. Come to find out, our friend Kevin is like all huddled in bed. And he's got these 2 little chicks cupped in his hand next to his chest. Like, this is his heater, right? It's like the only source of warmth that there is, right? And he has to surrender those so that she has a bit of peace, that she hadn't lost more than the one that she served us for a meal. The thing is that bodies will warm, chills will go away, boots will dry out, all of this. Our takeaway from this experience was her hospitality, her warmness of heart, and the memory of connection. We don't have any excuse to not open our lives and open up our doors when we see things like this as a backdrop of how people give of their lives, not of their excess, of their lives to welcome people in. And so God wants to restore hospitality within the body of Christ, that we invite people into our lives, we invite people into our homes. And another takeaway would be, she practiced hospitality without expecting anything in return. It says, Elisha saying this, "You've gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or the commander of the army?" And she replied, "I have a home among my own people." His meaning is that she felt secure and content. She's not looking for favors from someone that's an insider, to speak, to the king and get another vineyard over here or a plot of land or a, new home or to live near, the royal family or any of these things. She's not looking for, kind of a federal government handout. She's not, I got a home. I'm among my people, more or less. What else do I need? I'm doing this because out of my own heart, I want to offer you hospitality. I want to connect with you. And this is my heart to you to facilitate what's going on. And so I have to ask, is this our posture? When we extend hospitality or open hands or meeting people's needs, do we do so with open hands, palms up, without expecting anything in return? Because really, that's God's heart. He's working in us and through us for that end. Next takeaway is she experienced unexpected blessing because of her hospitality. So she'd left the room. Elisha's talking here, and he says, "So what can be done for her?" Elisha asked. And Gehazi said, "Well, she has no son, and her husband's old." Then Elisha said, "Call her." So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. "About this time next year," Elisha said, "you will hold a son in your arms." "No, my lord," she objected. "Don't mislead your servant, O man of God." She's thinking it's just too good to be true. But the woman became pregnant, and the next year, about the same time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha had told her. The proper posture is to offer of our lives without expecting anything in return, but the Lord wants to surprise us. That doesn't necessarily mean every time, cha-ching, and that we're going to get something, but the Lord wants to surprise us. When we're walking step in step with His Holy Spirit and walking out His heart and life and connecting with people, and we're becoming vessels for Him to connect with others and to reveal Him to others, He's going to surprise us. She's not expecting it, but He flows and He blesses anyway. This just reminds me of, sometimes these things can be big, and this is a pretty big deal. She got a son in her old age, and she was childless. But some things are small, and sometimes we're really making an impression whether small or big. And just for me, it's like, I remember one thing that I kind of hook onto is that, I grew up here, moved to Florida, became a Christian in Florida, sold everything I had a few years later, went to Texas, go to Bible college and things, and I'm trying to fund Bible college kind of out of monies I got from selling everything. And so I'm living a very minimalist life, right, and stuff. And so So they had this cafe like on Friday nights and things, coffee and ice cream and stuff, but I just never went because I'm just trying to stretch the dollar. I'm not going to go in debt to go to Bible college and all these things and be anchored down. And so, but I've gone months without ice cream and things, and I just, one day, just kind of I thought, man, ice cream would be really nice. You know, but the only place you get it is a cafe, like on Friday nights, right? You know, so I got my tray going down the line, you know, cafeteria, and you're taking stuff off. And just as I get to this section of the thing, right where the desserts are, someone's back behind, a hand kind of comes through the back onto the glass shelf and thinks, 1 cup of ice cream. Too late for the person before me, and it was too late for the person behind me. And you know, the Lord just does, whether big things or small things, just like that. I never prayed a prayer. I never said, God, could you give me ice cream? No. It's just this thought that I had, and I'm walking down the thing, and here it is. That's the goodness and the unspeakable heart of our Father, that He hears our hearts, He knows our thoughts, and at times that He just wants to surprise us. And whether it's big or small, those are things that we hang on to, that we see Him active. And especially amplified when we're walking step in step with Him. So just winding down here, that just so that we have some kind of takeaways here. Just in remembrance that the Lord has commanded us. The Lord is wanting to kind of nudge us along down the lane of opening our lives and opening up our homes and being hospitable. He's given us some warnings or things, that concerns to watch out for to make sure that we don't miss it. Here's some line items that we can take away that hopefully we can remember that will be helpful to us of saying, I'm willing, but I don't know how. Here's how. Recognize the opportunity. Generally speaking, that's going to come right in the sphere where you live. Generally, you don't have to go far out of your way to find opportunities. God brings them into His life because it's not about us, it's about Him. He's orchestrating. Be enthusiastic in your hospitality and connection with other people. Be consistent. You know, don't have it to be haphazard. To build relationships, to build friendships, to have Him work through your life and into their lives for kingdom impact, there has to be a consistency. Have a plan. Okay, set it aside. It's not going to happen by accident. We have to be intentional. Be generous. Offer of ourselves to other people. We may not have little, but in His hands it's going to be enough. Because it's the relationship. It's not how splendid the meal is or how fabulous our home is. Be generous. Expect nothing in return. Have that posture of heart that say, you know what, Lord, I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing it for me. You know, I'm not expecting anything. But then have open eyes to see the things that He does in unexpected blessings, whether big or small. That He will surprise you from time to time and just say, I see, I know. I want to bless you. You're my child. I love you. And look at this. Okay? So opening our homes in biblical hospitality is not the goal. Okay? This is just kind of a tool that you take out of your toolbox because it facilitates relationships. It's not the end. No, it's the conduit that flows to the end of we're building relationships with people. Okay, it provides a setting to make kind of effective relationships. And again, just falling under kind of the umbrella of what I mentioned at the beginning is that it's a way of us being disciples, of making disciples, and building the church. Okay. I want to make one offer here is that things kind of within our own realm that we should be able to recognize. But one of the passages in here was to invite strangers, these foreigners, these aliens. Wendy and I lead a ministry, we're in startup, to connect with internationals here in Fort Wayne. There's little less than 1,000 in here from all over the world. Saudis, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, China, all over the place. And so many of these folks have no or little opportunity to hear back when they're home. And the Lord is bringing them to our doorsteps so that we can connect with them. If you have a nudging to take that step and to open up your lives in hospitality to people like that, Wendy and I want to come alongside you and help you do that. Okay, at the end, we just have these cards. Come and see us. We'll give you one of these cards. It'll point you to our website. It'll show kind of practical things that you can do. We have a training that we do for that, and just to be able to be a help at reaching people that God dearly loves that have yet to hear about him. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this opportunity that we can all gather here together. Father, even as the heart said, Lord, here's my heart. Speak truth. Lord, I pray that you would take your heart and, Lord, make that ours, that you would work in our lives to bring about your will. Lord, we see that your movement toward us, that you loved us while we were yet sinners. You came to seek and save the lost. Lord, help us in opening our lives and our homes to take a posture of hospitality so that we can continue, you continue doing that we become the vessels to have that happen. Amen.